in the Utah House of Representatives, and I'm sitting here next to our new designee, our new, what do you think, assistant?
Associate Commissioner, I know.
Commissioner. I was trying to remember
We have tricky titles here.
Yes.
Yeah, it's so nice to see you all. My name's Taylor Adams from the Commissioner's Office, and I'm joined by my colleague, Richard Gonzalez. We're so excited that this initiative comes into student success and access. The work that we do is all about how do we get more individuals' experiences into higher education. So this is just a perfect fit for us, and we're excited to join you today.
Good. We appreciate all the work that Jared Haynes has done in the past. He really helped to get this started, created, up and running over the last, I think, 3 years that we've been doing this. So really appreciate his efforts, and he is now retired. So I'm really glad to have all of you here and working hand in hand with us. Also, Brett Farr was the Department of Corrections appointed education representative. He is now taking a position with Salt Lake City School District. His replacement on the council is pending the executive director's appointment. So today we have online joining us, Maria Shirey. She continues as the executive director's designee on the council. So welcome, Maria. Do you want to say hi?
She
saw her. Okay, she's coming back to join us.
Yeah, and I think we're also maybe going to have Eric screen us.
Oh, good.
We'll see if he makes an appearance today.
That would be great. So we need a motion to approve the minutes from June 18th.
I move to approve the minutes from June 18th.
So moved. All in favor, say aye. Aye. That was, wait, again. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Okay. Any opposed?
3-0.
Great. More than 3. And also to my right, I have Senator McKell, who has been on this commission for the last year. Is that right? Is my
Yes.
co-chair
Yep.
together?
It's fantastic. So, yeah,
Yeah.
it's good to be here.
And the work that we do here is just so collaborative. There's been so many changes thanks to the collaborative effort and the subcommittees and groups that we continue to work with. So first of all, we will be having Representative Clancy join us shortly. So I'm going to put a pause on him. He will be online. Maybe you can send him a text and see if he's on. And we'll come back to item number 3. So we're going to move right into item number 4, the reintegration work group. We have Dan Powers and Tanner Coons from Davis Technical College. And there is a 2023 report that from our committee that study item number 4, page 6. And so Dan and Tanner, I'm going to turn it over to you to give us your update.
Too early, Representative.
Too early.
No,
I am
we're-
just like ready to
go.
Ready to go. We'll just give you a second.
Tanner and I held a couple meetings with the Department of Corrections, formerly incarcerated students to see just what the reentry component could look like. And first, we immediately found out that it is an enormous thing. So we tried to really zero in on what the education and what this council could bring forward with it. And the bulk of the information that we received and have kind of vetted really indicates that education and reentry are best served while that individual is still incarcerated. The Department of Corrections needs to allow an appropriate amount of time for people to complete their certificates or their degree programs. In the student population that we talked to, about 3/4 never returned to school once they were released. Everybody indicated, well, it's because it no longer was a priority for them. It wasn't that it wasn't a priority, but it fell down the list as they tried to find some place to live, all the other things that come with being released from prison. So of course, one of our recommendations is that Department of Corrections continues to work towards timely completion, which I think is a metric that all of our institutions report out on. Let's see. Again, with former students, completion of a certificate or degree almost always led to immediate employment. We found that these jobs do align with the degrees that they either completed with Solid Community College, Andy's group, or certificates with us. Additional certificate or degree bearing programs would provide more opportunities. We are finding in talking to Solid Community College, we're suffering from it. I think Andy can as well, that the demand far exceeds the number of people that we can serve.
I'm gonna put a big highlight on that comment right there. Will you repeat that one more time?
There is more demand than there is space. I think is probably the easiest way to put it. It seems to be especially an issue on the women's side. I think Andy can probably speak to that. Dr. Bakaboy, with the lack of space that we can actually hold classes is difficult. In addition to that, we found that there is a need for earlier intervention, probably best served at the county jail level. Basic skill development, college readiness would increase the likelihood of success once they arrived at prison. Increased access to program and then allowing enough time to complete the program, and also providing a stable enrollment for that student while they're in class, all play a role in access to their FAFSA and continued enrollment part post incarceration. Again, we were finding that individuals are not having access to FAFSA when they leave because of their intermittent attendance while they were incarcerated, when they had other commitments that created these situations. Post incarceration, a complete FAFSA prior to release, including all of the institutions that serve the Utah State Correctional Facility, would aid in a speedier enrollment, ensuring students have appropriate documentation to qualify for aid prior to release. Again, state IDs, social security numbers, things as basic as an email address are really needed. In terms of reentry as institutions, I think all of us could attend the local reentry fairs to provide, again, that conduit between their incarceration and our institutions. And again, to circle back, completed financial aid paperwork, scholarship paperwork, and proper identification makes things easier to qualify for that aid once they're released.
So that's it, that's the big hitter right there, right? A lot of barriers. And those, I think one of the most important things this committee, this council does is to identify those every single meeting to know how we're doing on that list. So I'd really like to have that be, since you verbally gave them to us, I'd like to actually have a hard copy of that list on part of our agenda next time to know what are we doing or what's the progress on those. And I do want to mention back in 2023, I passed HB 194 actually requiring that there be two things that related to what you mentioned. One of them is the ability for inmates to actually have you contact them after they get out of incarceration. But that has a lot to do with corrections. Eric Hutchings, welcome. And you're there with Maria Shirey. And so knowing how they're doing, I'd like to get an update from them in just a moment of being able to have every returning citizen, do they have an email? Do they have a Google account, so to speak, where there are documents, their resumes and other things, as well as government issued IDs or copies of those, however we want it, we are doing that. And I've got other conversations going on with that. And then the second question is, of course, with there's been so much change. It's been so exciting with Director Red and all that has transpired in the last year. And so I think some of the question for corrections is in this, also in HB 194 back in 2023, allowing education to start as soon as possible. I think it's good to get an update on that. And I would definitely like for our next meeting to have a report on what's happening digitally for additional access for inmates who don't have a physical seat, but could start on some other classes and coursework if they're waiting their time. So Andy, I'd actually like to, if you have any comments first, and then we'll go over to Eric and Maria.
Sure, Dan, thanks for that. I think you outlined so many of the issues that all of our programs are facing, and I'm grateful for this space to kind of talk through them together and see if there are approaches where we can tackle them. One thing that I would like to share and kind of as an update, we have been running for the past 2 months or so, a training program with incarcerated students who are enrolled in our program to do kind of peer tutoring, peer advising work. We've raised about $100,000 in private funding to support the development of that program. We have the University of Utah Reading Clinic involved. And so we're really hopeful that we can partner with Davis Tech, Salt Lake Community College to kind of support some of that work so that we have incarcerated peer tutors working with alongside you all, helping in those areas where we know that there's some classes that students frequently have challenges on. Specifically, when we talk about math, statistics, even reading and writing, the Writing Clinic Learning Center on campus are all really eager to get involved in this work. And so would just invite you, both of the institutions to come out, meet the peer tutors, and see if we can plan together on ways to kind of support all the learning. We're doing that on the women's side. It's a kind of pilot program, small scale to begin with, but it's an area where we're hoping that we can get to the place where we're also doing work to support workforce reentry and having some like peer advising work happening there. So we've got another grant from the Education Justice Project at the University of Illinois to create a reentry guide. We've got a team of 10 people working on it to do a statewide reentry guide that we could train folks inside to do some peer mentoring in conversation with UDC. Don't want to step on toes and redouble work that's already happening, but if there are areas where we can do some of the training to ensure that folks inside know about the resources that are available for reentry, I think that's another area where we're prepared to support.
You know, I appreciate that, and that you're communicating with our educators who are in the classes as well. So Eric and Maria, do you have any updates for us or other comments regarding some of the barriers that have been listed here?
Yeah, we're actually on the agenda, Representative, and have a few updates that we'd like to do. Do you want us to just address those questions, or would you like us to do our presentation, or just address them as part of the presentation?
You know what? Take some notes and we'll come back to you. How's that?
Sounds good. We got you.
And item number 1 on the agenda, I've been working with corrections on some language for the role of the reentry division in corrections. So when we're talking about the opportunities that we have, I hope at our next meeting, I'll be able to have some language for you to look at that we'll be refining and have you give us your input. Just gonna wait for a little bit for Representative Clancy if he's able to join us in a few minutes or not. So do you have anything else, Dan and Tanner?
We do not. If you would like Tanner to talk a little bit about the expungement, he can do that now instead of later, or.
Yeah, let's go on the agenda. We'll go to the next item.
Let's do it.
So, yeah, that's great.
Representative Ballard, if I can just.
Yes.
Comment. One of the observations I've made concerning the challenge of reintegration for college students is that the nature of higher education for us in Salt Lake Community College inside the prison system is that our students cannot do any of the administrative tasks necessary to be a college student on their own. A big responsibility of the prison education program for Salt Lake Community College is to be that liaison. So we go in and we help them fill out the FUSs, we fill out admissions, registration, all of these things that normally a college student would do on their own through access to the computer. And so leaving that system, once that happens, if they have not yet completed their degree, the lack of familiarity with the college system and navigating that, as well as just the familiarity of just being able to address those things for themselves as an individual. one of the things that happens in incarceration is that it stunts maturity and growth and infantizes people through the process. And so what we're seeing is a very significant challenge in retaining students once they leave. To be successful, we are going to need as a college to be able to hire a full-time academic coordinator who can focus on reintegration and student success. Because it is very difficult to retain students who have never done anything on their own and to help them navigate the complexities of the college system. Without that, our success in this area will continue to be, well, I don't want to say abysmal, but I would define it as such. We need to, this is one of the things that we need to greatly improve in as an institution.
So I think as you.
Could I add to that?
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, Matthew.
So I think the other question is just like, when you transition out, that in and of itself is very overwhelming. I think for most 18, 19-year-olds, when they go off to college for the first time, that is in some ways equally overwhelming because of the change. And so for those of us who are been incarcerated, you're trying to list through all these priorities of all the things you need to do, and school falls to the bottom, partially because there's other things that just feel so much more important, getting a place to live, getting a job. But I have seen in my experience and the experience of many of my friends is that I just don't think that they get that there is a path where there's FAFSA, where there are part-time jobs, where a lot of kids do this. Like if you're a 30-year-old, in many ways, as David was saying, but maybe not fully mature adult, there are paths to work and get a degree that I think that are just seem very, very foreign and misunderstood by a lot of the people that have been incarcerated, whether they come from families that have never gone to college before or just don't get that. So I think there's an opportunity, because you mentioned the overstepping on what the schools can do and what UDC is doing, I think, to just show that, hey, there's a way forward here where you can be successful on parole, reintegrate society, you can provide for yourself, you can live, and you can get a degree, which unlocks a lot more opportunities for you. And that's where I think there's a gap as part of those barriers.
So maybe you can communicate with all those who've just spoken about actually giving us a list that you think we could start addressing and checking off. And I think that's all of this is crucial. I'm seeing a lot of notes being written here next to me by Taylor's, which is awesome. And I hope also, we also had HB 248 this last year that really opened up for those who are incarcerated from the onset to start all of their programming and as much as possible and education much earlier instead of just the 2 years before they leave. It would be great to have more completion and for them not just to complete, but be the TAs and the teachers and be part of that process. So I look forward to that for our next meeting of really looking at that list and what we can start doing.
On a happy note, this semester, all of the students incarcerated in the women's facility with Salt Lake Community College, with the help of the Department of Corrections, will have access to a personalized secure laptop. And it is my hope that just the familiarity of navigating a computer system, even though they're not doing the college bureaucracy itself, but just that we'll start to see some benefits in that area. So there is a happy note on that, but a need for growth, most certainly.
And we've opened up a lot of things like Medicaid 90 days before they leave and so forth. So what do we need to do to open that up before they leave to help them to be registered and signed up again on the outside? I think that's really important for us to address.
Can I just comment
Yes.
very quickly? So Dave, with you about the need for our programs to have more staffing when possible. I know that's a large expense, but certainly an important one in addition or in the meantime. I think this peer advising program that we're developing could be a space where we can train peer advisors on how Pell works, and so that there's some familiarity. I know that a lot of the time students, it just seems kind of like magic because we do the work for them as you state, and so they may not be best prepared on the way out to know how to manage those things, but we have our university systems have people who teach how to use Palo all the time. And at my end, I think it's just a matter of getting those resources inside, training some folks inside who most of them are in our BA program who we're working with, so that if we could help serve some of your students in that way, that's kind of how we're envisioning this kind of one-stop shop.
Thank you so much. That's very exciting. We're so glad that you guys are in doing what you're doing now, especially this semester. It's wonderful. Thank you.
It is exciting. There is a note here for us to vote and discuss on what reintegration recommendations we want to forward to corrections and to USHE. I think that's gonna definitely, let's keep our list, and at the end, if we have some things that we want to make sure are included for 2025 or for our next meeting that we need to be able to follow up before those deadlines come, let's for sure do that. So let's move on to number 5, 2024 institution program and advisement reports. This is from each of the institutions. I know that you've given us some of your information, but these reports are really important for us to have a summary, but of what you've done, but also we always are identifying how can we help you? How do we need to collaborate more? And so we'd love to hear from each of you. We have, looks like we've got Snow College, Davis Tech, Public Community College. Do we have someone from UB Tech here? Okay, and then raise your hand so I can see which one you are. Or, oh,
There we go.
Yay! Okay, since I called on you first, why don't you go ahead and go first? How's that?
You know, I was just sitting here thinking, I wish I could do this because someone else filled out that report and sent it to you, our vice president of instruction, and I'm filling in for her today, and I haven't seen that report.
Okay, we'll look forward to seeing if we can find that and make sure it's included for other things that we're doing. And did you want to include anything else?
Yeah, on our end, kind of similar to Dave, if there are ways that we could do some support on even part-time staffing to kind of help with this one-stop shop that we're developing on the women's side, that's an area where kind of training folks inside. We've raised funds to be able to compensate the tutors, and we're in the process of working with UDC to figure out how to do those contracts. That's something that Brian Faber had laid the foundation for with us. And so that would be kind of one area where we're imagining state funding would be helpful to allow us to have staff to train people who can then kind of reach a large group on the women's side.
Okay, I am going to put a hold just for a moment because we do have Representative Clancy, and I know his time is very valuable. Representative Clancy, thank you so much for taking the time to join us. We're here with the Higher Ed Correction Council, and I've got Senator McCall at my side here, and also Taylor Adams from the Office of the Commissioner of Higher Education. And if you could just take a minute to give us an update on your efforts for reentry that we can look forward to, and know if we need to collaborate with you on any of that. We would just love to hear about your vision of what you're doing for the 2025 session. Awesome. That's.
Hey there, can you hear me?
Yes.
Perfect.
Now we can't.
All right. Sorry about that. I'm just leaving the chamber meeting. Well, first of all, thanks so much. I apologize for the tardy joining here, but we are really excited for the prospects of this session. It seems like there's just a lot of movement in the space. For a little bit of background, we have worked with both with Utah Valley Chamber, Salt Lake Chamber, Department of Corrections, many of our private sector partners to just talk about what are the gaps that we're seeing and how can we fill those. So a couple of things that we've been looking at, and I'll speak broadly, and I can answer more questions if there are specific ones. But broadly speaking, we're looking at employment. How can we make those connections to employment, full-time employment, gainful employment, 40 hours a week, hopefully with insurance. Really just helping individuals re-entering, make sure they know what employers are looking for, and making sure that employers know what individuals are looking for as well. So being more specific with maybe certain convictions or certain criminal record that could apply, should apply, or should not apply. Those are things that can just help with those warm handoffs, helping employers look at best practices for hiring guidelines. What are the risks? Are there programs? Are there ways that we can expand incentives to those companies who are looking to build a bridge with individuals leaving incarceration? The second piece is coordination, and this is something that Representative Ballard has done incredibly well by creating the community correctional councils. We want to make sure that the community correctional councils don't just look at county level things, but coordinate with our state partners, specifically with Department of Corrections and the prison. Many times we have state prisoners who are incarcerated at county facilities, making sure that they're planning for reentry as well, and all looking at the same system. The final thing is looking at some licensing, looking at ways where we might be able to help people move along the process. We had one individual, her name was Robin Sims. I don't know who's on the call. I can't see. I don't know if she's here, but she was a graduate of the Other Side Academy for over 4.5 years. She'd been clean, sober, drug-free, crime-free, and gainfully employed. Well, her and her husband wanted to start a motorcycle sales business. It took them over 3 years to get their license to sell motorcycles because of offenses relating to narcotics from their past. So looking at things where it's common sense, where we can move the needle. Doppel's an incredible partner on this, and they're really passionate about it. So those are generally the areas in which we're looking in, but I'm happy to answer questions and excited to learn more about what these other initiatives are.
Does anybody have a question or comment for Representative Clancy regarding those that he's working on?
And for me, just the main question of some contact info for businesses, organizations that I know that are trying to help and do what you're already trying to coordinate. Because obviously I do a lot of that myself, and I own my own business here in Utah, all that stuff. So
yeah, one of the things that we've heard over and over again is from different private sector partners is like, either A, we're already doing this, here's what's successful for us. How do we help other businesses emulate our model? Or B, and I would say B is more common, but it's the idea of we want to be a leader in the space. How do we go about that? So that coordination and those contacts is something that we hope to put together. We hope to look at putting together kind of like a private sector clearinghouse, if you will, where if you're a local employer or on either side, but mostly from the employer side, and you want to get more involved in this, you want to learn from other businesses, we want to make sure that we're not siloed away from corrections, right, either on the county level or the state level. Support and expand upon what you're doing. And if you drop your email in the chat here, I will shoot you an email, just give you my contact, and we can just keep working on this.
We'll send that to you, Representative Clancy. And I also want to mention, we do have here Helen Hansen from the Department of Workforce Services. Last legislative session, we actually put a charge, I believe, to their office to have some kind of a website to house this. So are you working with Department of Workforce Services for this kind of clearinghouse website?
We haven't got too deep on specifics yet, but I will 100% reach out and see how we can support and be helpful.
Yeah, I think that's the better way to do things, of having the chambers communicate, and whether the Department of Workforce Services defers to them and utilizes it. But we did put in legislation just last year that they are supposed to house this type of website. And so we'll connect you also with Helen Hansen with Department of Workforce Services about the best way for the chambers and the Department of Workforce Services to be able to move forward with that. And I will also propose to you, I think something that would be great to consider is how those businesses, whether this is in legislation we may need to do, we have a tax incentive for them for hiring, but I think it would be great to create a partial, like 6-month housing scholarship that they could also get a tax credit for, that's very short-term, temporary, but it allows them to have a place, unless we're coordinating with these new community correction centers. I just think that's a good part of the conversation to at least address, because that I already know is like one of the number one things that's a big problem just for that first reentry circumstance. So any other questions or comments for Representative Clancy? Yeah, Dan Powers.
If I could just add one thing, and the focus on employment, I think, is very, very important, and it's exciting that this work is being done, but I don't think, I think stable housing should come long before stable or before employment. These individuals finding jobs is not difficult. We bring employers all the time, they make job offers and say, you're leaving next Tuesday, where are you gonna live? And they say, I don't know. Or the job is here, you know, where are you in that proximity? Well, I don't know. You know, I don't know where I'm gonna be. I don't know where I'm gonna live. I'm gonna live on Dave's couch for a month, and then hopefully Tanner or Andy will have me over,
Been there,
because then I'm
done
gonna
that.
live there. But now I live too far away from my employer, so I can't get to work.
Yeah.
The employment component is important, but I think until individuals have a stable living situation, it's kind of secondary.
So let me perhaps add a little bit to that, since that's why I brought up that, you know, short-term housing scholarship kind of idea, right? Also has to do with, lost my thought here for a second. With preparing to get out, that should be a lot of the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council within that local county to help identify where that is, because there are currently some Medicaid housing funds that are available. And we need to have these Criminal Justice Coordinating Councils actually help with the re-entering citizen and what that housing Medicaid waiver or whatever it is, I can't remember what it's called, stipend. It just needs to be coordinated. So Representative Clancy, I'm really glad that you're in that space. And we can follow up again offline, but I do know that Wayne Niederhauser, we call him the housing czar, is aware of that fund that could be utilized, but I think coordinating with the reentry division is really crucial to help to do that. So we're kind of looking on our end, and that's where my legislation comes in, is defining what's the role of the reentry division, right? They can't do everything, but can they facilitate that reentering citizen knowing, okay, who's my contact that's gonna help me finish my education or get my housing or make sure that I've got my medicine. And right now, the Criminal Justice Coordinating Councils are really great, but there's no connection with the returning citizen. They do all of their structural things, and we need to figure out that component, that connectivity of who are they supposed to contact and how are they supposed to do it. And that may be a legislative change, Representative Clancy, for that Criminal Justice Coordinating Council, to have somebody that is the advocate for reentry, for them to know how can I get some help if they're seeking it. Some don't want to be touched, right? They're like, I'm out of here, don't talk to me again, I'm off the record, right? But others want, with your help, have seen the vision of what they can do. So thank you so much, Representative Clancy. We appreciate you hopping on, and this has been this is a great group that we work with corrections to coordinate how much preparation and education we can do while they're under our roof. before they get out. So thank you so much.
It's my pleasure, and I'm just going to try and do my best to stay out of everyone's way. It's a large issue, and so I just want to be helpful where I can, and just get behind everyone else and support our other efforts and not be duplicative. So thank you so much for having me, and sorry for my tardy joining on there.
I was trying to delegate to you, Representative Clancy.
We don't want him to, we do not want you, Representative, to stay out of our way. We want you to join us.
Yes, we want you to join us. So thank you.
I love it. Thank you.
Okay, all right, back to item number 5, more institutional reports. We have from Snow College, we have Jay Olson. Why don't you give us your report?
You bet. Thank you, Representative and Senator McKell. We're glad to be here, and we appreciate the opportunity to be involved in the Central Utah Corrections Facility with what we've been able to do. So basically, our report included what we have been doing for a number of years on the technical education side with construction management and a culinary arts program that the culinary arts has been for non-credit, but that all changed here as of this last week. So we have culinary arts students that will be in the aligned technical education culinary arts program starting out, and our construction management is fully mirroring what we have on our college campus here in Ephraim for construction management. So we've done some real work to get those two programs really reflective of what will benefit students as they are released into the public to have some skills. So we had and we have capacity for 20. We average about 16 to 18 students in construction management. There's capacity for 20. Some of them start and fall out for various reasons that we're all aware of that happens within the facility. And in culinary arts, they can also handle up to 20 students. They average about 16 to 17 in their program. We have an administrative assistant that is in the prison that takes care of all the paperwork. She does do some advising. It's somewhat minimal, but she does do some advising with the inmates that are involved in these programs, getting them registered for classes that align and move them forward in the alignment of the course that we have, courses we have outlined for each of those two programs. So as things move forward on the technical education side, we're excited for the opportunity with funding to move in at least one, maybe a second additional technical education program into the prison. Jory Thomas at the Central Utah Corrections Facility has found space for us to move in a automation technology program, which is really kind of part of the advanced manufacturing skills to go into the management, maintenance of manufacturing facilities. And we're looking forward to that opportunity with Second Chance Pell when that comes through for us at Snow College, or the awarding of the grant that the Department of Corrections put forward. And we're just kind of waiting on to see what happens with the funding for that. And then we're also doing some things on the academic side, and Christy's here as our academic representative into the prison. So I'll let her just review kind of quickly the academic happenings at the corrections facility in Gunnison.
Thanks, Jay. So right now we're working with Salt Lake Community. So thank you, David, who's been very gracious to allow our faculty to teach on the general education side under their permissions and their federal approval until our federal funding has been approved. So we currently are teaching 4 classes there under SLIC this semester. We have 4 scheduled for next semester. We're also doing a pilot program right now in the 3 county jails in our area, Juab, San Pete, and Sevier. And what we're trying to do is offer IVC education to a select group of inmates in each of those facilities, the state inmates. I think we have 31 that we're planning on teaching in the spring. We have currently 11 that we're teaching right now in the fall. And we're doing that similarly to how we do concurrent enrollment. And so those students actually will view their classes through IVC methods. And we have some CBE funds, and we're going to use those funds to purchase 100 computers for the 3 jails and the prison. And we will divide those up. So each jail will have 10 of those prison-ready computers, and the prison will have 60. And we're working currently to set up the technology with the jails that are missing some of the technologies for IVC, so we can make sure to have those classes available. And those students that we have in the jails currently, we're actually scholarshiping them under our state approvals right now. So we're paying for them to attend until we also receive federal funding for that. And the jails are part of our application for our federal approvals. And I think one of the areas that we're most excited about right now is the combination of what Jay's doing on the technical side with what we're doing on the GE side with our Tech Connect program. So if students complete technical certificates, they can then take those technical certificates, and through Snow College, they can use those certificates to count those towards elective credit to earn an associate's degree. So instead of applied degrees, those are actually an associate in science, which they can use and then continue their education once they're done with school. And then some of those classes that previously were not, we were teaching that weren't allowed for credit in some of those programs, we're working right now to create a system for prior learning credit so that they can still earn elective credit for those courses as well. So that's everything we have up to this point, and we'll keep you posted as soon as we receive our federal funding. Oh, one more thing, we also have some peer tutors that we're working in the prison. Some of our students in there are just fantastic. And so we're working on hiring them so they can work as an English and math tutors down at the Central Utah Correctional Facility to help. And I really appreciate some of the ideas already shared about those mentoring processes that are needed. And so I think we'll try to consider that as well, as how can we use some of those tutors to help mentor the inmates to better understand the higher education system.
Christy, I just have to say, thank you so much for that update, because I know that the technical college side down in Gunnison has been stuck at kind of 40 people, you know, for quite some time. And so I'm hearing through some of the work that you're doing that it's really expanding. How many jails do you serve?
We have 4 in our service area right now. We're currently starting with just a pilot program. We're working in JUAB this semester, and then in spring semester, we're going to have a pilot program between Sevier and Sanpete. But we're starting very small with only 10 inmates per facility to make sure we have everything figured out before we expand the program. And they still have to meet the requirements that they do down at Central Utah Correctional Facility. So once we get that figured out a little bit and start expanding, we're hoping that we can offer more CBE options in the jails to move students through the system. I think the biggest issue that we're experiencing right now, and I'm very new to this position, so I'm still learning, but one of the challenges that we face is we find a lot of the inmates have prior credits from a lot of different institutions, and they're moving throughout the system so much that trying to track what classes they've taken at the different jails and also at the different prisons in the state. If we can, I don't know if there is some sort of mechanism in place where we can track these different classes so that no matter where they are, they can still work on their degrees and just make sure everything's articulating to all of the institutions. So, but that's what we're doing now. So right now, currently we have 31 in the jails, and then we have 40 on the academic side and 40 on the technical side.
Great. Yeah, Taylor's taking notes so that next meeting she can give us that update of how we're going to articulate the records.
Yeah, and I also think you're onto something with the prior learning work that you're doing in the CBE. Like, I wonder across our state, I know that these are happening in greater ways for all students, not just incarcerated students. So I also think that as our groups are meeting about how are we doing prior learning assessment, that this has to be an integrated component to that of how are we doing, but then for incarcerated students, what does that look like? What does the transcripting look like? How does that transfer from your institution and taking it there to another institution as well?
Well, Representative Ballard, we feel really privileged to be able to be part of this Tech Connect and maybe be a little bit ahead of that prior learning, those technical credits towards elective credits, because of what we're doing just with our on-campus students. So we see it as a real benefit to the inmates in these facilities, both the state as well as the county facilities. And as we have the opportunity to expand additional technical education programs, that just increases the opportunity for more students to participate in an Associate of Science pathway, because as we look towards our future expansion, we think with some good planning and coordination with Central Utah Correctional Facility, we could offer many general education classes there and furnish that general education need for students who are completing technical education credits in at least 2, possibly 3 or 4 technical programs.
Well, I think that's definitely the charge that I feel like the responsibility that this group has, because many thousand, I think it's what, 2,000 or so inmates are given to jails. I'm probably off on that, but plenty of state inmates are out in jails. How can we help facilitate that education, the programming? I know the corrections has been really great to look at even the treatment, being able to align as they're moved from one location to another, to be able to continue that instead of starting over every time. So I know that they're working on those things directly, but I think that is definitely something as we move into next year of how is that pilot working with the jails? How can we continue to have that model expand the offerings that we are doing and providing digitally? Because we just can't be everything in person, and there's no need for every jail to reinvent the wheel when we've got the wheel.
Yeah.
So yeah, thank you so much. Let's go ahead and go to Salt Lake Community College.
Thank you so much. I'll start by just saying how wonderful it is to hear from Snow College and the growth that is happening there. We have really appreciated the chance to work closely with them to help things get up and going in Gunnison. And it's so important, and it's so exciting to see the institution take over and to move in the direction. We've been facilitating the classes, as Christy mentioned, paying the faculty and registering the students as Salt Lake Community College students. And that's because we currently have access to Pell resources, whereas they are in the process of making that happen. And we'll hopefully have that transpire in the very near future. And we'll be able to, as we've seen, run a successful, robust program there for many years to come. So very excited about that. In terms of our student numbers, we're about at 270 this semester, give or take a few issues that we have to work out. We, as I mentioned, are having great success, and with the Department of Corrections help, we have brought in an additional 80 secure laptops, adding to those that we already had inside the facility. And so all of the students incarcerated in the women's facility have access to a personalized individual laptop this semester, which is very exciting and wonderful, and something that we've wanted to see happen for many years now. How that will look moving forward remains to be seen. I think it is. I don't think it's feasible for us to facilitate and provide personal laptops to every single one of the students that we have inside the prison. They're very expensive, and just maintaining them is a full-time job for someone. If you're talking about getting the information on top of, in the laptops that needs to be there, extracting that, making sure that they're running appropriately, getting the clearances done, making sure that they're taking care of any problems that may occur. That is a full-time position for someone in the college to do something like that. So I think what we will need to do moving forward, given the restraints that we have, lack of resources, is that we will distribute the laptops out between the male and the female, the women's and the men's facilities, and to specific students in specific classes. For example, if they're taking an English class where there's a heavy writing demand, that would require a laptop to be accessed. Or if there is, certainly our computer science courses that we're running. And then ultimately then to have those laptops, as well as whatever corrections can provide, set up in a computer lab so that students can throughout the week then come to the education building, or even access and have some of those laptops available in the housing units in some of those teaching rooms that have been set up that way, that are not really used typically for teaching, but to have laptops available there in the housing unit so that then students can come in and share and work, is the way that it seems most feasible for that to function moving forward. We have, for those who aren't aware, we've been operating under the position of a second chance experimental site status. And what that means is that we have been experimenting with the Department of Education, what it is like to restore PAL in the prison and and address the challenges that occur. So in this experimenting, we have not known how many classes that we could facilitate and handle as a PEP team, how many classes that Salt Lake Community College and students could handle internally, because we have to do so much for and in behalf of those students there. We haven't known so much. We've been learning, and so we just kind of run to see what we could do feasibly. We're going to need to temporarily reduce the amount of students that we're able to offer education to in the prison. I'm hoping that it's a temporary thing, that it won't last too long, but we just do not have the infrastructure to be able to maintain the numbers that we've had.
Are you talking about personnel?
I'm talking about personnel, yes. I need to have staffing issues. I need to have people to be able to make this happen internally in the college and with the PEP. It's just we can't continue operating with these high numbers. So we're now, as we're transitioning from the position of an experimental site to that of an official PEP with the Department of Education, we're taking the time to catch our breath and focus on creating a proper infrastructure so that we can handle even the number of students that we have without having to have myself and my team put in 60 to 70 hour work weeks and things like that. So we're shifting. I'm in the process of having discussions with our provost, with the cabinet on how we're going to structure the PEP long term, but that is our focus currently, and it connects with transitioning to the position of an official prison education program with the Department of Ed. So it's tough because before Brian Favre left, he sent out some surveys, and we saw that there were something like 900 qualified individuals in the prison that would like the opportunity to start to take college. And the things that we have worked on together, Representative Ballard, the initiatives, and it's changed the way that prison education functions, really, inside the correctional facility, because now with the state support, higher education really is changing to part of the treatment programs that are offered there. It's like therapy or like high school education. This is a treatment program that is very effective. So we need to, it's exciting that we're making these changes, and it's difficult to pull back for a little while, but it's necessary. It's very difficult for our college to handle the numbers that we've brought to them in admissions, in the registrar, in financial aid, because we interface with every department on campus. So that's kind of where we're at right now.
I appreciate you sharing that. At one point this last year, we started creating more data graph, so to speak, right? Of where the numbers are, where you see they can be, or where you feel like the right number would be, and what those barriers are. And so I'll talk with, how do I address you? Commissioner
No,
Adams?
just Taylor.
Just Taylor,
Yeah.
okay.
Call me Taylor.
All right, I'll work with Taylor for our next meeting, really, of and with you about what that structure would look like, because unless we understand what the barriers are, USHE doesn't even know how to help you. Corrections doesn't know how to help you. And if it is, sometimes there's salary issues. Sometimes it's hiring, sometimes it is the hardware that you need, right? And so I want to have it much more of a checklist that we can look at and work on every meeting that we have. So that because it's one thing to talk about it and it's great to hear all the changes and improvement, but I want to help work on that barrier checklist and making sure that who can do something about that checklist is able to help facilitate that. We're also in a new funding structure. I know that it's not necessarily on this, but I'm stressed about it. With the, really what the direction is that we decided to take for funding, education with the, prison surcharge, the telephone surcharge going away, but maybe corrections can address that as we're going through, but that's where I think the role of this commission, having legislators, having having you and having corrections, is to identify where should some of those funds come from and which ones are the priorities and how can we help continue to move things forward. So thank you.
That seems like a very effective way to approach this list-wise. And it'll be great. And I don't want to, I'm pretty direct with challenges that we're facing, but I don't want to seem too negative because it's just necessary. It's part of the growing process. So we're going to take this time out, but Salt Lake Community College is completely devoted towards this program that we've been creating for the past 6 years for it to be successful for decades to come. And that's why we're taking a little time out. And so in terms of registering new students until we can create this infrastructure, and then it'll be temporary. We will move forward and we will be consistently in the 300s. And then depending upon what we want to do as a council and with our partners and everything else, hopefully facilitate even more down the road. So thank you.
All right, Dan, Davis Technical College. Do you want to say anything else?
You got any more?
No, I'm done. Thank you.
No. We were super excited to talk a little bit about the Tech Connect program, but I think Jay and Christy have taken care of it. The best part of that is we're already having students that complete with us earn 30 to 40 credits with Snow College towards their associate's degree, which is huge. We're completing a build out of a 20-seat computer lab in the women's facility to help those students complete those associate's degrees with Snow College. That should open within the next week or so. And then the registration process will begin. Last month, we graduated 110 students, which was back to pre-pandemic numbers for us. So that was really exciting. We currently employ 7 teaching assistants. With the help of Stephanie Patton, we're going to receive a $15,000 Perkins grant, which is really exciting for us as well. We're also submitting a grant with Stephanie at the end of this week that would allow us to add 2 additional programs for men and women. This particular grant also covers the infrastructure, which would be portable classrooms as well. So hopefully we can add some space and add some additional programs. Some of our women's programs that we implemented the year before last produced their first graduates this year, which was exciting. The IT program that was initially designated for women has now moved to the men's side and is at capacity with a waiting list, which we did not have when it was available to the women. We have a goal of this year of graduating 186 students. Pretty ambitious, but I think we'll get there.
Could you say that again?
What was that? What was that, Dan?
Well, now that it's out there and it's public record, we have to do it, I guess.
Say it again. We want to make sure we hear that.
186 graduates is the goal this year.
Let's go.
That's amazing.
So I think we can do it. We're well on our way. So we also helped the Salt Lake Chamber of Commerce develop an employment guide for employers to employ those with criminal records. And actually next week, we'll welcome our first IET students, which are adult learners that will now have the opportunity to complete high school, all concurrently enrolled with us and earn their certificate in business.
Awesome.
That's it.
So, I think at this point, let's go to Department of Corrections. There's been a lot of things mentioned here, and you're really where the rubber meets the road of being able to help open these things up. And I just want to say it's really exciting for me because before we had HB 194 2023, women were only getting business certification or culinary certification, and any other kind of education was not even available. So now that that's been opened up to have an equal opportunity, it's not the same classes, apples for apples, but an equal opportunity. The statistics that have been given today are really substantial for women to have the same opportunity for education. So I'm really, really happy about that. So, all right, Eric and Maria, you're up.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for having us. Senator, Representative, and if Clancy's still on, Representative Clancy, but just first of all, just a big shout out to all of you. You all are amazing partners. We know that without you, we would be in a really, really rough spot. And Maria can elaborate on this, but there's just such great research out there around the positive impact of exactly what this council's been talking about. When you put education together with employment, recidivism drops as we haven't seen anything else, I'll just put it that way, that has had a bigger impact or the opportunity to have a bigger impact on helping people successfully stay out. And Maria actually was at a conference and brought that back, and there's just good data around it. So without you all, and I'll just put it this way, we all play a role, we all have our crusades that we get on, but it's interesting to think about what you do as helping with safety in the state of Utah. It's part of the mission and the vision of the Department of Corrections, obviously, is a safer Utah. And so thank you. And that may seem a little tangential to most of your meetings, but for us, you play a critical role in that. So thank you. And I wanted to go through, Maria and I are going to tag team present on this, but we're going to share, Representative, a quick presentation. We'll go through it pretty quick so that we can have plenty of time for questions. And there we go. We good?
If we can see it here, thank you.
So what we thought we would do is we felt like it'd be important to give you a little bit of context, because the questions that we've been talking about, the programs we've been talking about, go into a really nice context around reentry. And so this is where we used to be. So reentry historically has been helping people prepare to leave the prison. Stop. That was the goal. What do you need to have? What is the Board of Pardons expecting you to have? What are the elements that you actually physically have to have in place to leave? And there wasn't a whole lot of conversation about where it went after that. I mean, we have AP&P, and it's not that we haven't done anything. It's just that there wasn't that continuum kind of a context around it. And so this is how we look at it today. And this is what I wanted to share with you all, because I think it's going to make it very obvious how you fit into what we're trying to accomplish in the mission and vision of corrections now. So Representative Ballard said this a little bit ago. We've moved everything. When you come in now, you have incarceration and intake, and you can see there our efforts to understand who you are, what your needs are, what your challenges are, what the opportunities are for us to be able to help you be more successful. That starts literally when you come in. And so how we deliver that is going to be individualized, which is a big change. And especially to my legislative friends, it used to be that everything was in big blocks. Are you a felon? Yes or no? Are you a sex offender? Yes or no? It was just these big generic blocks, and you got put into one of those blocks, and then the conveyor belt started, and you basically just went down a certain conveyor belt that on average did a pretty good job for the average individual. The big thing that I would like to hit on with this is that's changing to be individualized, which is more complicated, it's more time consuming, you gotta have more resources, but it is way more effective than just doing something that's on average is gonna be pretty good. And so you can see where, right when they come in, we start doing assessments. So one of the assessments that I wanted to bring up, and I'll hit that in just a second as well on another answer, but just where they are, what their background has been, education, all of that. So we do mental health, we do several different screenings, criminogenic risks, but also where their education is and their literacy is. And so we don't yet have enough data to be able to report back to you all on where we are with literacy. But we're working on that. We're actually gathering that up as we speak with a test called the CASAS that is informing when somebody comes in where they're at with that. But then there was also a push, and Representative Bauer, you'll remember this one. We need to make sure that we're getting people into the right places and at the right time so that they can get the programming that they need. And that's just a super helpful part of making sure that everyone has the right opportunities. And then you start kicking in the programs as early as we can, as many as we can in several different ways. And so a big shout out to all of you for the effort that you're doing with the computer labs. It is a tremendous lift, and we are unbelievably grateful for the work that you're doing, because allowing that next layer of accessibility is going to be a big game changer. And part of it, and I appreciate the comments, was, you know, if you're not comfortable navigating a laptop, I mean, so many things that people tell you to do. Hey, when you get out, go to our website. You know, make sure that you're looking in your email for this. Well, if you're not tech savvy, or if you can't even read and write, those are two really complicated things to do. And so I felt like it was important for you to see this context, and you're going to see this over and over and over again, because we want just all of our stakeholders to know how much we appreciate them and how much we recognize the role that they play, and also begin conversations maybe that are already started and continuing, or that need to start, about how we move this even further and sooner after they re-enter. And so we can think of it this way, and Dan Chestnut, who's the director of our reentry division, loves to talk about it for protective factors. CCJJ did a nice report on this, and when we get some research from them, maybe we can share it over. But you have risk factors, you have protective factors. And if you have more risk factors than you have protective factors, the odds of you going back to prison, the odds of you victimizing somebody else, the odds of you staying into whatever criminal behavior you were in are very high. And so our effort, with your help, is to start stacking these protective factors onto people. And so when you talk about your stackable degrees, the credits you can use and transfer over for elective credits, all of these things play a critical role in our ability to begin just stacking all of these protective factors onto people so they can be more successful. But this continuum is just a really important way to express that. So.
And I would just add, Eric, if you don't mind, if you take nothing away from what we're trying to explain here, is that this is not just a language shift for the department. Yes, we used to call reentry the tail end of somebody's sentence, the last 60, 90, 180 days. Now, this is a philosophy. This is how we're describing reentry across the department, that reentry really begins, reentry planning begins the minute somebody hits our doors, and preferably even before that, because we know that if we can provide the right interventions when somebody is just on probation and they never have to touch the inside of a facility, that's the best outcome. So they're not into that cycle right away. So really, again, if you hit it earlier, Representative Ballard, we just cannot do this alone. And I think as a department, we're recognizing that more and more, that at every phase, we need to be collaborating with our community partners, collaborating across our divisions, and pulling in more multidisciplinary teams to develop these individualized case plans for people, so that it's not just cookie cutter programs and you hit your education at this point in your incarceration, but it's really identifying what that individual person needs to be successful.
Yeah. So you can see here kind of a list of the things we work on. Screening and assessments right up front. And then the individualized plans, we talk about that quite a bit, but that, we're taking that very seriously. These are not just a generic plan, like we've got an A plan, a B plan, and a C plan, and you're on plan B. But these are individualized, and it's for the whole gambit. It's, if they need, substance use treatment, if they need literacy help, if they need vocational training, they're going to be brought in, and I'll elaborate on that in just a second, but putting together the treatment, the education, and the job preparation, we believe that's where the magic is gonna happen. And so doing that in a comprehensive plan with the community partners, it's the only way it's gonna get done. There's just truly honestly no other way we're gonna be able to accomplish that.
And I think before we get into the actual report portion of this, it's important to address, and I love that so many of these things were already mentioned in the meeting before we were given an opportunity to present. We see opportunities right now that we need to pour some attention and resource into. Top of the list, I think Dan said that, housing, employment, transportation, and just the community resources that are available to people post-release. We're looking at this in a way as care navigators. One thing that we've already done is move some of our specific reentry case managers, so those who are focusing on the last portion of a person's sentence, back into the community. They were once in the prison and now they are in our community treatment centers and in our communities so that they can help be that bridge for people after release. We know we need additional treatment and education opportunities, certificate-based learning, all of the many of the things that were mentioned that we've recognized as needs, and warm handoffs, not just internally between AP&P, our reentry and rehabilitation division, into our communities, but also with our community partners as well. And then we've pulled in some additional resource in our training division to look at our LSR&R, which is an assessment that we use to assess somebody's risk, just to ensure that we're doing that to fidelity. Without a proper assessment, we can't create the individualized case plans that we know that will work. So thank you for reinforcing that you are seeing these as opportunities as well. And we definitely are hopeful that we can make a lot of these things happen with continued support.
And I'll just share that when we talk about expanded treatment and education, what you all are doing to help us figure out, and you can see it, you're experiencing it right alongside us. Some of these individuals struggle. The comment that was made earlier about after they release back out into the community, Salt Lake Community College sees a lot of them drop off. I know that that's universal across the board. But being able to help us, these protective factors can be chunks. They don't have to be really big, long-term challenges. And so the efforts that you all are making to help us to get some of these folks some small wins as they're going along is just a really big deal. And we had a chance to attend Davis Technical Colleges. I apologize, haven't been to the other ones, but Davis Tech did a graduation, just awesome. You look at some of those people there, it's the biggest, most important thing they've ever accomplished in their lives. And it changes the game. They start to understand that they can be a different person. And so I know a lot of those things are, you complete one class and we give you credit for that, complete the next class. Every one of those that we complete is a protective factor. It helps them believe that they can change and that they can have a different life when they get out. So I'm gonna answer just a couple quick questions because there was a few things we wanted to do a follow-up on. So out of legislation, and this will look familiar to our legislators, but ensure that an assessment level of the education, or excuse me, an assessment of the education level, occupational interests and aptitudes is completed. And so we're actually doing that now on entry. So when they're in receiving an orientation, that occurs there. That's the first step when somebody comes into the prison, is they go through R&O. And so we're doing it there. And then as they move in, the case managers will use that, work with them and help continue to do that. And you can see there, the CASAS is what helps us to be able to figure out where are they, you know, can they read and write? If they can, at what level? Can they do college courses, or do we need to focus on even high school or maybe even earlier than that and just basic reading and literacy? And then the occupational interests are included in that. We work with them when they enroll in their different educational programs to make sure that they're aligned with the individual. So this goes into what we were talking about with the case action plans. And so number 2, refer to an advisor. So we believe that at this point, it's a little complicated, but that's mostly, we just need some additional resources to really dial this in. But thanks to each of you, we're making it work. We're getting people there, but to the point that there is a massive amount of effort that's going into this to help get them enrolled, to get them in their classes, to get everything set up for them. There's just no question that we're gonna need to continue to have conversations about how to make that more efficient and easier to get done for everybody. And then on the reentry work, I just wanted to clarify, and this was Brian Favre that helped me with this one. We do case action plans. That's the part of the reentry. That's what we call them. So when somebody comes in, we do the assessments. We help them develop a case action plan, which includes everything that they need to do, not just adding protective factors, but also treatment that's required, board required steps that they have to go through. We call them education milestones that we put into the case action plan. So to try and not get them confused, the case action plan is the plan, and inside of that plan are education milestones that they set as goals for their education and their vocational training. Just wanted to share that with you.
And before you go on to the next one, just go back for a second. I just want to mention, it was also one of my colleagues passed some legislation this year, when you talk about vocational goals, that UDC actually helped them apply for a job up to 60 days before they leave. How's that going?
We are getting close to being able to get that done. The challenge, and you guys mentioned it a second ago, so thank you, Representative, for bringing it up. Emails, making sure that they have emails, that they have computer access. We are working on exactly the same thing that you heard referenced a minute ago, where we have corrections appropriate machines that they'll be able to get access to, and emails. We're a little challenged at the moment and still trying to sort out. We have a new director of technology and innovation. His name's Ryan Day, that helps us work on this stuff. But Google has some issues with us setting up so many emails, and I assume it's part of a kind of an anti-spam protocol or something. And so we're working our way through that, because we generate so many of them from the same IP address, that we're trying to sort out just exactly how to get that going. But it is definitely in the works, Representative, and we're getting much closer to having that rocking and rolling, not only in the prison, but also in the community correctional centers.
And we've also reignited an effort that we had previously around some technology governance for those things that incarcerated individuals use. We're trying to encompass all of those things. So we're looking at a digital health and reentry tools review, so that as people are requesting what is needed for people to communicate on electronic devices within secure electronic devices within the correctional facilities, that anything that is going on that is vetted, is run through a security review. We're partnering with DTS on that, and just ensuring that that is a really strategic process, so that we don't have to pull back once we let the access open. I think that's probably the worst thing we can do, is set it up and then have to take it away. So again, reestablishing that review and governance process for all of the things we use, from the computer labs to any personal devices like tablets, our kiosks, and even into our phone system. So just wanted to make you aware of that sidebar project that supports this.
Yeah.
I was just gonna say, you have to be careful about what type of email address is created, because otherwise it labels people. Right? It's gotta be mixed up enough that it's not a label. Oh, you've got one of those email addresses, right? So you have to use a little creativity on how to figure that out.
Think we ought to avoid that at departmentofcorrections.com thing at the end of it.
Maybe not a good idea.
Yeah, Bob at utahinmate.com. So,
Sorry, I would like to add just one more thing. We've also implemented an incarcerated individual advisory council that's expanding from our Bear units into some other parts of the facilities where we're also getting feedback from our customer, right? Our clients and all of this about what is most helpful to them in this process. And to your point, they have expressed that they can't do much without a mobile phone and an email address before release. So we are seeking input from them on what's going to be meaningful, most helpful. In a recent leadership training, we had a panel of people with lived experience. And I would say it's one of the more impactful things I've seen in my career, and being open and hearing to the people that this ultimately impacts in addition to our community.
and I appreciate and want to really drill home what Maria said about safety. Because, and you guys can understand this really well, that cell phones, we actually ran legislation this last year to make sure that cell phones were on the list of contraband. A cell phone in the prison can be extremely dangerous. That's how people get in touch with outside gang members that try and organize retaliation, that they extort family members. A cell phone can be a really useful tool in the right hands, but an extremely dangerous weapon in the wrong hands inside of a prison. And so we're trying to move quickly, but very carefully, because I think Maria said it very well. Once we roll out the opportunity to get these people really set up as they're moving out, we don't want something to happen that all of a sudden just shuts the whole thing down. So especially again to the legislators, please recognize that our efforts are focused around security, and you can't predict everything, you can't prevent everything, but we just, every chance we get to let you know that we're working on these goals, but trying to do it in a way that protects the inmates, protects the family members, and most importantly, protects victims while we're doing it. And so treading lightly, but very intentionally trying to make progress forward. And then finally, this is pretty much the same. Do everything that we can to try and make sure that we're giving proper guidance and assistance as people are putting together their case action plans and they're working on their education milestones. I believe as we add additional resources in this space, it'll become more and more efficient. But I just added this last one, just once again to say, we know that you all have gone way above and beyond in helping us to accomplish this, what we believe is absolutely critical objective in helping these people. So it's recognized, we appreciate you. And again, as more resources come on, we'll be able to streamline this and make it more efficient. It's working. People are getting where they need to be, and they're getting into the programs and the classes they need to be in. But hopefully we'll be able to do even better work in that space going forward. So, okay, and that was anything else? That was our presentation. Hopefully we covered all the questions that you had for us, Representative.
You have a comment?
I question real quick, but first, thank you, Maria and Eric. That is so exciting. What wonderful developments. I was just curious, could you comment though on the structure that UDC will put into place for the case managers? It's my understanding that they will be primarily civilians moving forward, and then I don't know if they'll be working under the direction of a sergeant or captain. But what do we need for that?
The vision is a hybrid. So we know that there is some value in having case managers who are certified, same as we've done with some of our civilian educators. That having the viewpoints of both has been really helpful. I think in the past, even with pre-sentence investigators, which I know has nothing to do with this group, but there was a mindset that you had to be post-certified to be able to effectively do that job. And we've kind of slowly integrated some civilians into those roles, and it's been pretty successful. I think the more we recognize that a diverse team is a better team, that it can't just be one or the other. That's what we're going forward right now. I think as you know, and you've identified, we're making some changes with our case managers' working hours, with where their work locations are, where they had previously been in some offices, we're having the expectation that they're in the unit more often so that they're meeting with people, checking in with people and working more collaboratively with our department or division of prison operations staff, our officers, our sergeants, who know the people in their units so that they can be a support outside of just our OMR, which is typically the only time that they've communicated now. So as for an official structure, we're still kind of working that out. And also I just will mention, because Brian Favre is no longer with the department, of course, we're very sad about that, but his position is, we're currently recruiting for that and it closes next week. So I think as we bring the full team back on, we'll have a better idea of what the end result looks like. But I wouldn't say we're going completely civilian or completely certified at this point.
And there's some strategic advantages to both sides. People will talk to a civilian in ways they won't talk to a law enforcement officer. But also, if you have a civilian, they typically have to be accompanied by a law enforcement officer. And so you have more staff that are required if they're not certified. And I don't know if you guys like the model. I would just say if DTC wants to pick this up, you guys could have some folks, case managers at your school that can carry a gun and a badge and escort some of your special students around campus. Might be helpful. That's how we manage some of ours. I'll just throw that out there as an option that you guys might want to pick up.
And I do want to, I think I may have misspoke just a little bit. When we talk about a certified case manager, those positions will of course stay certified. We also have case workers, which have similar roles, and those are our civilians. So that is what I mean by a blend. So sorry for getting that wrong.
Yeah, it's we're trying to be as efficient as we can and get as many people out there as we can, but equally as importantly, the right people so that our folks will feel comfortable talking to them, working with them, and that they'll genuinely feel like they're here to help me, not just to have eyes on me. And so anyway, we're super optimistic about it, the impact that it can have. We think it's gonna really move the dial, so kind of excited about it.
Well, we appreciate that update, and I have to say, thank you for actually using what's in statute to see how we're doing, just because that is an important measure that we have to adhere to. And I also recognize this new administration because previously we would request something or try to work on something and it was always no, no, no. So we'd have to go in statute to get it done. And now it's almost the other way around, that the conversation is, where are we headed? This is what we're interested in, and corrections starts doing it. And then we codify it so that regardless of who the next director is going to be, that this is best practices. And so I really appreciate how quickly you're responding and preparing and planning. It's great. So now we're really going to get to the serious part as how are we, what's our plan to pay for these things? What's the priority? Are we actually asking for the things that we need to ask for from the legislature in the 2025 session?
Yeah, thanks Representative Ballard. And I have to say, the other day I was driving home and I got a call from none other than Jared, and he was already retired at that point and had been retired for 15 days. And he said, I'm kind of homesick. How are things going with higher education and corrections council? I know you have a meeting coming up. And I said, Jared, go back to the coast or whatever vacation you're on right now. But he really misses you all. So he did a great job in preparing things ahead of time for his departure, which I am so grateful for. I know that his work has been so great here. I attached to the email the draft considerations of recommendations, and I believe you all have collaborated on those over the course of the past couple of meetings to understand what are the recommendations moving forward after this 2024 year, and what are we pushing forward as well. I know also that he's given me a lot of folders to look through, some that are labeled stuff you might want to know. So I am looking through those and sorting through. I do think I will be reaching out to institutional representatives to make sure that we have your reports, as well as I've looked at some of the reports and there is a spot for recommendations that's blank. And I just want to make sure that if you really need to have recommendations, that those are there. So I think that what we'll do is between this meeting and our next meeting, but hopefully before October 18th, Dr. Richard Gonzalez and I, my colleague in the commissioner's office who's over adult learner access, will reach out to you all and coordinate some meetings, just so that we can meet with you all individually and understand, do we have your reports? Do you have recommendations that you'd like to share out in that October 29th meeting? As well as, I've taken a few notes today, and I know that there are some working groups that may have recommendations that are more formalized by that point in time. But I think what we need to get to is a place where we're more formal in our recommendations and have that prioritized list. Because I think priorities are going to be important. As I've been listening to the discussion today and have listened to past discussions, there's a lot of work to be done and a lot of great work that's happening. But I think a prioritized list will really serve us well as we move forward for the future recommendations. So with that being said, in this list specifically, I wanted to talk through maybe some of them that are already there, and then talk through other ones that we may want to add to this list that we already know about, or that you all have maybe had conversations about that I'm not aware of or didn't make it to here. And then we can really plan to have those meetings between now and October 18th individually to coordinate with each of the members of this council to ensure that all of the recommendations are represented. After that, after our meetings, we'll send out an email summary, kind of, because I think what I'm hearing is I see some themes emerging. It's just, I think we need to make sure we understand what those are moving forward. And then we'll send that email out. And then at the October 29th meeting, we'll be able to address each one of those individually and decide on how they make or don't make the priority list for this cycle. If that's okay with you, Representative Ballard.
Yeah, just a little bit about where we've been. At one point, the funding was all from corrections and contracted, and then we tried to move it back out to the institutions, and it's kind of gone back and forth. And now we also have the stress of, you know, the telephone surcharge that we can't charge more. Corrections can't charge more than, I believe, 6 cents, and they were charging 10, and that was going to education. So I think as you are going to give us this report, I think hearing from each of you, does this structure work? Does it put strain on your institution? Or do we have a different recommendation? I just want to make sure. Last year, we ended up with some legislative stress because of the funding of where it was housed, and instead of in other base budgets and other things. And I don't know if it needs to be part of the institution's base budget, or if there needs to be a separate corrections and education budget. That's what I'm looking at structurally to see what you're going to present to us.
Yeah, I agree. I think in listening to some of the past meetings, I think it was Senator McKellen last meetings, and he had to step out for a call, but I think in the last meeting, he talked through some of that uncertainty, right, of the funding and how are we going to approach this? Is it going to be an institutional budget? Is it going to be something that we take to other councils to look at or recommend, or other legislative bodies? You know, that with the Utah system of higher education, we've redone how we're doing requests for appropriations this year. So that looks different than it has in the past. And I think while people thought, oh, maybe this was an avenue, maybe they thought that last year, it's different now, how requests for appropriations come through that body. So we do have a conversation started with Nate Talley, our CFO, to also explore if institutions have been including different things like this in their budgets, and some of our institutions partners here may actually know that, but we'll certainly have those conversations. I think in the last meeting, it was decided that they would be taken, if I'm reading this correctly. So if you look at number 1, funding structures, we have the council recommends that USHE and UDC continue the current post-secondary prison education models with funding and requests for tech ed provided through UDC as part of its reentry program, and funding for degree granting education through the higher education institutions. I think one complication that you've brought up already today is that surcharge account and how that may be different moving forward. So this may no longer actually be useful. So I think that we can certainly explore that.
And I also have a little bit of a stress thinking, okay, if it comes from the degree granting institution, then they're fighting for other dollars. And this is a different request. This is a different pot. And if an institution is going to pick for what they're doing on their campus versus right here, it's unfair, I believe, for them to have to choose between the two. So that's where I'm wondering if we've got Eric and Maria here. Do we need to create a different funding group from UDC that helps to do this? Do we? I don't know. So why don't you present what you have and let's see if we need to make some changes, especially with how higher institutions are getting their recommendations for appropriations. But it's a huge priority for this discussion today.
Yeah, great. And I will talk with Commissioner Landward and Deputy Commissioner Talley on some of these things too, because it is, how do we best approach this? And, you know, regarding your conversation of how is this fair to institutions, that we're kind of, how do we help institutions prioritize this in already really strained budgets? And so I think it's important to discuss and also bring UDC into the conversation of their funding streams and how it might work moving forward. Okay, great. So I'll be able to talk through the budget recommendations and funding structure in the next meeting and hopefully do some groundwork there that I can send ahead of time. Other considerations for recommendations are listed below. So there was obviously, we talked about reintegration today, and I think that the conversation, Dan, that Representative Ballard said was, how about we get a prioritized list of some of these reintegration things, and you can bring those back to the next meeting. We can have discussions with you ahead of time to kind of get that solidified list that then we can decide on and vote. Institution-specific recommendations, I covered that, but in some of your reports that was left blank. I just want to make sure that you actually don't have recommendations, and if you do, that those move forward. But I also see that some of them were discussed previously because of these funding needs also listed on that same page. You may have brought those forward. I just want to ensure that they're all accounted for in this process as we carry on. And then we have case action education plan. So Eric and Maria, I know that you had, you know, loose recommendations in there, but I'm wondering if there are some top priorities that you all have that you'd like to bring back to the October meeting for us to consider as it relates to case action and your education plans that maybe we can coordinate on. I did see some loose language in there, but I want to make sure that they address your needs, and I'll coordinate with that with you specifically. Reintegration's on here again, so I don't know. I'll take that off and we'll move into the top one. And then we have a certificate articulation for the next meeting and student mentors. So Jared did leave me just to, as we address this really quickly, he left me with a list of things that maybe had already been agreed upon or talked about in future meetings. And I think those were a couple of those. So I'll reach out to the bodies who are representing those areas and make sure that they come. And also because in that meeting, we are going to be deciding on recommendations, I'll make sure that those groups or individuals, and if you're one of them, you'll be asked to present actual recommendations that are prioritized back to this group as well.
So I'm going to open it up just for a minute. Here's the proposed structure, which is, you know, under item number 1. That UDC pay help with the technical education and degree granting institution for higher ed. Do you have any thoughts? Do you have any suggestions?
I have one for sure, and I think it ties back to something that Christy Stevens raised, a question regarding keeping track of information concerning which classes students have taken at what institutions and having some sort of way to process that. First, I want to acknowledge the fact that since we began this effort, there's been major growth. And the Department of Corrections we had so many difficulties in keeping students in classes in those early years. They'd be moved down to Gunnison partway through semester or to occupy a space at the county jail. And, you know, it's been wonderful to see UDC take this problem and address it. It's one that we don't see any longer. We don't have movement between facilities and classes like once occurred. So that's an important point. The second thing that I would draw attention to is that we report to UDC every single class that a student completes. So UDC actually does maintain through the case managers a record of all of that. And now that, now that our institutions are entering into contracts with UDC with data sharing agreements, which is necessary to exist as a PEP program that accesses Pell, I don't believe there should be a FERPA issue or concern like we have had in the past. The Family Protection Act would keep us from being able to just share immediately with the University of Utah private information that a student has, or with Snow College or back and forth. But having these data sharing agreements in place, and since we're already reporting this to UDC, and Christy brought up a very important point, but I see that as something that is being addressed and that I'm excited about. In terms of specific degrees, we have been very successful in coordinating our efforts with the University of Utah in their humanities degree, and it's something that we are pivoting more towards, encouraging students to pursue associates in that area as opposed to general studies, which is what we gave emphasis to in the past. So I see a lot of collaboration taking place, and I see a lot of growth and development that pertains specifically to this topic.
Just going back to the case action plans too, I heard something from one of our directors that works at a county jail with state inmates recently, and she was talking about how the student had come to the county jail and the case action plan required that individual, even though they had already received a GED in 2006, complete a high school diploma, which is possible if you get a GED before 2009. If you received a GED before 2009, you could also get a credit-based high school diploma. But she was very concerned about this because she was like, we're wasting all this time. The student could move forward. A GED gets you into a higher education, and we're wasting all this time. But the student was, but it's in my case action plan. I can't not do it. Otherwise it affects so many things. And so just being really careful with those case action plans to keep them moving forward and not going backwards. I know that there was a lot of incentive several years ago with adult education to keep students in adult education and not moving them forward. And we've done our very best to remove those incentives to keep them moving forward. And so, if we can make sure those practices that are kind of outdated now are kept out of the case action plans as well, so that they're moving forward into Salt Lake Community College or Davis Tech or other opportunities instead of, yeah.
I think Maria and Eric, you have a comment. I think it's your hand. Oh yeah, it is. Isn't that weird how it looks on there? It's like a separate screen or something. Okay.
Thank you for that. I would love if you can email me that person's information. We'll look into that case. Sometimes what happens just is that we will have a case action plan, and also some of those requirements are populated by the Board of Pardons and Parole requirements. And so we are also meeting more frequently with the board and with the members to look at specific cases together and see where our planning was really excellent, where we can improve, and a case like that would be great. So we can look at and see if this was a double contingency that we've put on somebody that was unnecessary, and what can we do in OTRAC or our offender management system to try and make sure that doesn't happen. So I'd love to look at that case if you have the information.
I'll forward it to you.
Thanks.
I'm opening it up another time. Are there any other comments or requests or concerns or ideas that you want to share with the group in this meeting?
Yeah, I'll just thank you, Taylor, for noting the we had some recommendations that may have got lost in subcommittee. That we had some technology subcommittee where we raised some areas that we could use some support. Since that time, we've found private funds to cover them, so that's good news. But we have some ideas that we would like to contribute to this list. And so if you want to set up a meeting, I'm glad to share some of those ideas.
Yeah, we'll reach out individually to everybody and coordinate those meetings, or if you can't meet, we're happy to do it over email. Like that, but we certainly want to make sure that we accomplish that, getting this list solidified to where it should be. I think that, speaking Representative Ballard, on page 2 was the recommended process for prioritization for both tech colleges and degree granting institutions or degree granting education. And I want to make sure that in our conversations, you look at those specifically because, you know, looking at the tech college and how we deliver technical education specifically, so not just in tech colleges, but in institutions that have the tech college role. We're talking about the prioritization being first, utilize currently available UDC resources, then request funds through the governor's budget, and then participate in a request for appropriation. I wasn't in past meetings, but I think this was discussed previously. And then for degree granting education, that's utilize currently available institutional resources, which, as Andy, you mentioned, could also include some private or grant funding that you all have received for these types of programs. Then look to the institution's performance or growth funding budget priorities. And then after that, if that is not an option, then submitting institutional or budget requests. Now, I recognize there is a date on there of August 28th. I believe that Nate and Commissioner Landward are getting ready to meet with institutions on their budget requests. So you all may have more information if you chose this route and if your institution is specifically requesting funds, and we'll ask you about that in these meetings.
And one thing that's been brought up in the past is UDC, you do have the telephone surcharge account, and we have had an accounting at this meeting before about where those funds have gone over the calendar year. Can you be prepared to show that to us next time?
Sure, happy to do that.
Great. All right, let's go to number 8, Davis Tech Expungement Partnership.
You do it?
Yeah. All right, since I've talked so much this meeting.
Introduce yourself, Tanner.
I'm Tanner. I'm one of the academic advisors for Davis Tech.
Is the academic.
Advisor for Dan.
The Utah Department.
Yeah, they have me up on the main campus, and then Dan steals me every once in a while, come do visits and work with the students out there, and then kind of just support him in whatever he needs with the programs. We at Davis Tech were able to work with Rasa Legal. You guys heard it? Everyone's familiar with them. They're that nonprofit, and that's here in Salt Lake, I believe. And we've been able to work with them on building up a partnership. It's still kind of new, so we're navigating it. I've helped with a few people that have gone through it. But what we wanted to do was make sure if there are any students that are having any barriers with a background, specifically for their program that they're going into, they're able to go and see their opportunities for expungement. And so if they go through, we've set it up to where on our website, if they go through our website, it'll give them like almost like a voucher situation to help pay for any fees on a sliding scale up to a certain amount of what they're gonna do. And then Rasa Legal will be able to sit down with them and verify kind of where they're at with their own situation. If something's able to expunged, if it's not, then what's the time frame or cost, and then kind of sit down with them. So we just wanted to support our students who are going through that process, that there's, you know, some resources for them. It's always quite interesting to sit down with certain students, and then they bring up a background, and then it's like, oh, now that you're in this program and might not have an opportunity to get a job if you don't pass a background check, let's figure out, you know, some good resources to help you out. So we are helping them at a certain level with the financial side, but we want to make sure that they're going through the website so they're able to get that referral process pretty slick through. And that is found in our resource care center on campus.
I wish everybody knew how to have access to that. And the fees have been a huge barrier. So that's great that you're able to.
And some of the years changed recently too, so I don't think a lot of people know that. I'll go to the reentry fair once a month in Davis County, and I'll talk to a lot of them of, you have new charges, but some of the old charges might drop off and they're not even aware.
So just an update, I'm on the law enforcement criminal justice committee, and I was so excited because they've been redoing the sex offender list, right? They're now providing ways that you can appeal easier and at certain times. And I said, okay, that's great. How do people know about this? Oh, this is only for people moving forward. I was like, what? You mean somebody who's been on for 10 years, this won't count for them? It makes no sense to me. So I'll keep asking the questions because that just doesn't pencil at all.
Yeah.
So anyway, I appreciate your work with that, and it is, for sex offenders, they have to register every 6 months. They should get an update every 6 months. Where are you at? What are your opportunities? Others, it's a lot harder to even contact them, but anyway. So I thought it would be great to hear, especially on the legislative side of finances, from Senator McKell.
Yeah, I mean, the one issue, I'm gonna go back to your draft recommendation on page 2. I appreciate the prioritization, but I guess this is my offer to you, Taylor, is I'm happy to work on the effective appropriation on these. I think we've got some things that we need to expand, we really need to work on. So I always like seeing things in the governor's budget. Obviously, it's not necessary. For everybody in the room, the governor doesn't have a budget, the legislature has a budget, we set the budget. He has a recommendation, and oftentimes we listen to him, oftentimes we don't. The legislature sets the budget. But it's good to have the agencies recommending funding requests rather than me. But if we get to where, that first one with technical education with Utah Department of Corrections, if we can't get that in the governor's budget, don't be deterred, because I'm happy to run that request and see if we can't get it in. But let's see where you can get those. Let's see where you can get those dollar amounts first in those recommendations, and then I'm happy to try to take it from there. But I'm offering to help, I guess is my point. As I look at this, and I know it's a pilot program, I remember the presentation on the Duchesne County Jail and the heavy equipment, and how we're gonna kind of try to move that around the state to make that work. I think that's gonna be a little harder than the other ones, but just let me know, and let's try to get these done. And I am curious to see what the amount will be from Salt Lake Community College. And obviously you guys are doing incredible things, so we just need to get it done. So I'm here to help.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. It is so awesome to hear a representative just say, I'm here to help.
I'm
just tell me what I need to do.
I will speak at graduation.
Thank you so much.
Yep, so you heard it, right? You've got a champion for you right here. And so
I can fight for it.
we just don't know what we could do unless you ask. And so being specific really makes a difference. So I'd like to end by just highlighting something in corrections that I'm really happy about in talking with Director Red, and creating cultures within corrections of doing your homework and having the opportunity for education is really the culture of promoting good behavior and wanting change and having housing reflect that. So for those who have been in this committee for a long time, would know, but we've worked really hard for that conversation with this council for quite some time. So I just want to acknowledge corrections, because as they are increasing the housing opportunity like they've done in Bear 2 and wanting to do in other places, it really promotes that learning and change, and facilitates the motivation to get your education and be prepared to re-enter into society. So my hope is that we can get most of that all as much completed as possible before they get out, so we don't have to go chasing and they don't get discouraged after they get out. But we've got jobs lined up and businesses lined up and housing lined up, and it just will save the state a tremendous amount of money when, as we're continue to talk about homelessness. And I also applaud corrections because they're working on helping to find and recognize a healthcare platform that can bring in the doctor's prescriptions and notes when they first arrive, as well as after they leave, to give them to a new doctor. And that's a huge change for those who have been incarcerated because of addiction, for them to be able to have continuous care instead of just back on the street and then back in with us again. So I just wanted to recognize a lot of those changes, and all the efforts that all of you make is just exceptional. And it brings a lot of hope for families, not just individuals. So thank you, Senator McKell. And with that, motion to adjourn. You're here.
Eric, that was your motion to adjourn. I saw it.
Yeah.
definitely.
All right. All in favor, say aye, and all opposed can stay seated. That was a weird comment.